Takeoff, what do you think about that?
Sad, unfortunate.
Yes.
And if the reports are true regarding the brother Takeoff's death, one of three members of the Migos hip-hop artist group, they allegedly, it was Quavo, his partner, who got into that argument, which could have been prevented. And then they say that somebody from Migos group, I don't know how true this is, allegedly, somebody from the Migos group pulled out the gun and started shooting. And may have shot Takeoff by accident, inadvertently, with friendly fire. And then the opposition fired back. So what the reports are saying in the media, anybody can read them. Allegedly, again, I want to say that in respects to him and his family in the Migos group and all those who are around them. But allegedly, it was friendly fire that shot him first, and then opposing fire that finished him off.
Well, it didn't seem that friendly to me. But
Rest in peace to Takeoff, and our hearts and prayers are with his family, the Migos family.
That's right.
And all his supporters.
And what astonishes me, and I'm not talking about him particularly, but a culture in the hip-hop industry and in the music industry, how no matter how much money they get, how much fame they get, they just can't take that ghetto out of them. They just want to still participate in that culture.
You know, he was an innocent bystander, Baba David. He wasn't gambling. He wasn't arguing. He was just there. You know, from what I understand, he was a very laid-back, quiet type brother, and they said he was just there, like literally. He was just there, and he was an innocent bystander that got caught in the crossfire.
And I understand that, and that's why I prefaced it with saying it's not, my conversation wasn't pointed to him. It's about the music industry culture itself.
And not removing yourself elements within our community that can be very dangerous.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, like, you know, they want to continue, because where else are they going to go? They don't want to hang around those squares. So where are they going to go? They're going to go where the action at.
Right.
You know, they want to go where the drugs are.
And they should have been able, it was a bowling alley. I believe they was gambling at the bowling alley, so there was no illegal substances involved, from what I understand. And under most normal circumstances, that should have been a safe place.
That's what I'm saying. Why would you go somewhere where they're allowed to have guns?
The alley is well lit.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't think that would happen there. But that's exactly where it happened, man. We have to be careful out here. Our people are gun crazy. We're motor crazy, murder crazy. And as you said so many times, Baba David, and I concur, why is it we can shoot so many bullets and never manage to hit our true enemies?
Isn't that something? Or rob them either.
Never manage to hit our true enemies. Never. We will kill innocent boys, innocent girls, innocent men, innocent women. We will kill the disabled by accident. We will kill babies and infants. We never accidentally take the life of an enemy. Never.
In the wake of the death of Takeoff recently and all the violence in hip hop, we wanted to get your perspective on why is the influx of violence in hip hop, and is there a target on young black men?
That's a great question, and I have a couple of thoughts on that point. Thought number one, the media is both a reporter of reality and a projector of reality. And what I mean by that is research shows that the media can influence behavior simply by reporting on certain types of events. So the fact that there's so much attention put on the murder of rappers by the media, I think that gives people the idea to want to engage in harm against rappers. So for example, you look at police brutality. When the media reports on police brutality, at the same time, I think the media inspires more police brutality because you're constantly sowing that idea into the minds of the population. And when you constantly hear the same theme over and over again, it can give the impression that it is acceptable to do a certain thing. So when Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman and all the press that got, and it needed to be covered, I want to be clear. But at the same time, in George Zimmerman's acquittal and the popularization of his acquittal inspired other white people to want to harm blacks. So the
Hmm.
same thing with the murder of so many rappers. I think the media is inspiring this idea that it is safe and acceptable to kill hip hop artists. So I think we have to watch the media in the way it covers events because it can motivate people to want to engage in some of the things that it is projecting to be acceptable to do. So that's number one. Number
Hmm.
two, I think research needs to be done into how many of these murdered rappers had life insurance policies taken out by their music labels. I have yet to hear anyone speak to which of these rappers that we've lost so many of them, hundreds of them, when you
That's right.
talk about all rappers, not just those who are popular, but just everyday rappers that a lot of us don't know because they were signed locally. And so the question becomes, were these rappers insured? Was their life insured by a music company? Because if it was, I think that demands an investigation to see if many of these hip hop labels are actually getting these rappers murdered because they can make more money off of their death than they can off of their life. Everyone knows that dead musicians sell more money than living musicians. When Michael Jordan, excuse me, not Michael Jordan, when Michael Jackson, after his murder, and of course we know Michael Jackson was murdered because he refused to sell his stake of the Beatles catalog, and he refused to sell back to Sony his portion of Sony Records. And as you know, Sony is the largest music company in America. And Michael Jackson, in effect, owned 50% of Sony Records, the largest music company in America. And after Michael Jackson was murdered, and I believe his murder had a lot to do with the fact he didn't want to sell back the Beatles catalog, his music catalog. The sales for Michael Jackson's music quadrupled. I've even saw somewhere where it said he sold almost as much music in his death that he sold in his life. And we know that in his life, he was already the highest selling musical artist of all time, not Elvis Presley. So I think the music companies may have a hand in all of these rappers being murdered. That's number two. Number three, gangster rappers did not invent violence. They did not invent black on black crime. They did not invent fratricide. We know that America was born and birthed and nurtured in violence. If you took violence out of America, you would have to change the name of this country because it was conceived and it was expanded on the notion of violence. So I want to be clear. We can't blame them for the violence, but artists must be held responsible for their art. And although gangster rappers did not create black on black crime, they do glamorize it and they do popularize it. And unfortunately, I think we as a community have done a poor job of holding them responsible for the glamorization and popularization of community violence. See, the artist has two responsibilities. One is to report or to reflect the experience that they live. Comedians do it, uh, writers do it, actors do it, musicians do it. You reflect the reality you live. That is one responsibility of the artist. The other responsibility of the artist, and we don't see very much of this coming from our gangster rappers, and that is you have a responsibility to project a new reality, a responsibility to project a new reality. Although you may have grown up around guns, drugs, and violence, you should inspire in your community a future that is free of guns, violence, and drugs. And that's why I do not accept or condone this excuse by many of our gangster rappers that I'm only reporting what I see. I'm only uh, exposing what I have lived. That's not true because most of you don't live in those neighborhoods no more. You live
Hmm.
in gated white communities. So if you live in a gated white community, why are you still talking about drugs, guns, and violence? And that's because the music label will not promote or publish music that is not self destructive to the black community.
Mm, mm.
Is it there? I know for sure. I don't even know why I'm asking. I'm asking for the audience information. When people are children and they are dysfunctional, they can still grow up to become adults and still be dysfunctional. So if you don't heal the child, then what do you expect to come from the adult?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't heal the child, all those unaddressed problems in that child will manifest in the adult. That is a law of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot ignore childhood problems. They automatically grow into adult problems. And from a psychological standpoint, Bob and David, a lot of the illnesses that we see in the black community, the seeds were sown in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
The seeds were sown. Mental illness is rooted in the family system. Let me say that one more time. Mental illness is rooted in the family system, and the family system is rooted in the community system, and the community system is rooted in the society. So if the society is sick and no protective measures are taken, the community will be sick. And if the community is sick and no protective measures are taken, the family will be sick as well.
Peace and blessings. Thank you, Dr. Umar. I have a question regarding to our community and how we can ravage our own selves, right, in our own community versus the white power structure. The artist's job is to reflect the times, right? The Boondocks is one of the greatest shows that was ever created, one of the greatest pieces of art because it accurately described our community, while in a funny way, but it really brought light to very important situations. Brother Takeoff was just, murdered the other day, and what I look at that as, we saw the video and all that kind of stuff, and it hit me today. I was like, wow, this reminded me of the Boondocks episode in which they described that moment as nigga moments. And, we all know nigga moments as described by the Boondocks, which is a rational or otherwise a rational person taking a rational logical person taking an irrational route. They're reacting as opposed to responding. My pushback to your previous statement in terms of the white power structure being the greatest enemy, is it possible that our quote unquote nigga moments are a greater threat? Because even if we have these white systems in place, the system of our ego, right? The system of this street cred that we got to protect, this pride that we got to defend.
Let me answer that question quickly because I see where he was going. We are not our own worst enemy. One thing you have to do is you have to put these kind of predicaments and situations in its proper context. These nigga moments that we're talking about, how did they come about? Because they didn't just appear. They were born of the fatherlessness that was a result of the crack epidemic. They were born of the teenage mother epidemic, born of the crack epidemic and the economic castration of the black community that took place in the 1970s. All of our problems were created by systems over which we exercise no control at all. Look at the gangster rap. Okay, look at the institution of entertainment and how it pays our young men to put that filth out there. We don't control none of the major music houses. We control none of them. They all ran by European Jews. So my point is, I agree with you. We are a big problem to ourselves. Hell yes. You've heard me say earlier, we are number two. And we are complicit with number one. But number one, without question, undeniably and uncomparably, is the white power structure. We must never lose sight of that.
Absolutely. I apologize. My reception just dropped out. And I wanted to clarify also, I missed a good part of what you said, but I think I got the gist of it. But then my second question would be, and I think it was mentioned earlier in terms of conflict resolution, would you incorporate mindfulness practices within your schools, both of your schools, or throughout your entire schooling journey, in terms of the kids and these juveniles and all these people, all these kids rather, instead of wanting to fight each other, incorporating just mindfulness tactics and all that kind of stuff, or systems rather, within your schools?
Well, one of the things that is going to make the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey RBG International Leadership Academy unique, especially amongst the history of independent black schools, is we will have a bona fide African spirituality curriculum. A bona fide African spirituality curriculum. And our foundation will be the Yoruba system of spirituality known as Ifa, which I am a practitioner of. And so our children will learn African spirituality, and they will learn about the different types of African spirituality, and they will even be taught some of the New World African religions. I will have the Hebrews come and talk. I have the Nation of Islam come and talk. I have the Nawapians come and talk. I let the Moors come and talk. Of course, after they're done, I'm going to educate our young men about where we stand with some of what they believe as African people and as Pan-Africanists. But I don't think we should hide from our children all the different religions that are out there. I know as a child, I was exposed to so many different religions that existed in my family, and I think it benefited me to have learned about all of them when I was young. And to your point, without question, part of that spirituality curriculum is going to be meditation. Okay, mindfulness is a new word for a traditional African thing. There's nothing new about it. They just call it mindfulness. Okay, but that's a part of who we are in terms of spirit. And we're going to have all of that. It's going to be powerful. There will be prayer at the school. There will be meditation at the school. There will be aromatherapy at the school. We will be dealing with crystals at the school. I mean, our core curriculums, in addition to science, math, language, and social studies, are going to be economic and financial science, political and military science, dietary and nutritional science, agricultural, agronomical science, science of the black man, woman, and child, and of course, African spiritual and astrological science. The students will be divided up in terms of the spiritual component by their ruling Orisha, central to Yoruba thought, and it's true with most houses of traditional African spirituality. We are born under the influence of a particular divinity, a deity created by Almighty God, and that deity's personality can be found within our own personality. And so those young men who are sons of Shango,
they will be subject to a curriculum that helps them to understand Shango type energy, the energy of the king. For those young men who are born under Ogun type energy, which I am, they will be taught about the spirit of iron and how to tap into that as necessary. Those young men who are born under Obatala energy, they will study the energy of the white light, the energy of consciousness, the energy that gave creation to human flesh. And not only that, they will be divided by their zodiac. If you are a Leo, if you are a Scorpio, if you are a Taurus, you will learn about the unique energies, the weaknesses, and the strengths of your particular zodiac sign. The education that your son is going to get at the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy is going to be unlike anything that you've